you for being here for this press conference about the governor's veto of House File 140. Just about 24 hours ago, Senator Pratt and I delivered a personal letter to the governor's office asking if he were planning to veto, that he would meet with us. Well, that didn't happen. We've been blindsided by this veto, and that's very disappointing after the 1,000 hours that we spent working on this, the 45 iterations, the 25 different meetings that went on between House and Senate. The governor definitely is not understanding what compromise means, because we incorporated many of the compromises. It seems that he is bending to the Minnesota Association of Colleges of Teacher Education and to Education Minnesota, rather than listening to the stakeholders, because those supporting this bill are all of the education organizations, many of them not even well known to you. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Senator Pratt.
Well, thank you. I share Representative Erickson's surprise. We offered to meet with the governor. We offered to walk through the bill. We made a number of compromises. We wanted this to be a nonpartisan bill, and I truly believe we had a nonpartisan bill come off the floor. It's not something that I think either of us were extremely happy with, and I know the commissioner was, continued to have some items that she wanted to press for, but we came together. We came together and worked out a compromise that was good, not only for Minnesota School District, for Minnesota kids. The fact that the governor is highlighting the funding, in our letter to the governor yesterday, we committed to the funding. Both finance chairs committed to fully funding this transition. The fact that that's being used as an excuse to veto this bill is unconscionable.
We'll take questions.
So talk a little bit more about funding, because the governor said that was one of his very big reasons that it was not funded, and he's hoping that you can repass the bill with all the stuff in it.
Well, the governor has been repeatedly saying this session that we're not to mix finance and policy, so we followed his orders. We sent him a purely policy bill, and the funding is included in the Education Finance Omnibus Bill. And it is what the Senate fiscal note decided was adequate. It is over $3 million, and we have agreed that in the supplemental year next year, that if there are issues beyond that we will tackle those. But this is a very first important step to reform and innovation. Keep in mind that we have 700 community experts in our classrooms, and they don't have the qualifications that we have placed now in this tier structure. So I'm not sure what the governor means when he says, I want high-quality teachers in the classroom. Does he want no teachers? He wants status quo. The community experts are not the high quality that we've put in Tier 1, although we honor them, and we are so glad that school districts have the chutzpah to hire them and to bring them in and to work with them and make them their teachers.
You mentioned you put 1,000 hours of work into this. It's been a big bill over the last couple of years. Will you, in the next 3 days, take another run at this?
Senator Pratt?
Well, again, this caught us by surprise. I learned about this veto about 20 minutes ago. So I think Representative Erickson and I have to sit down and figure out what to do. Certainly continue to be in contact with the governor's office. The commissioners reached out to both of us. And so we'll just have to figure out a strategy from here on out. This is an important bill. And if you look at the governor's concerns about our Tier 1, we put more structure around Tier 1 today than what we have for community experts, by making them being required to be part of the mentorship programs and being part of the teacher evaluation programs, which they aren't today. And so we are committed to having high-quality teachers in the classroom, but making sure that we do have someone in the classroom capable of leading that class, and making sure that we don't have class sizes where it becomes unruly.
Senator, is there enough time to pass something by Monday? You said you're going to sit back and strategize, but seriously, do you have enough time?
Well, I have a file sitting on the House floor that I can send to the senator. He can refuse to concur. We can have a conference committee formed. I want to say this. I don't think the governor knows what's in current law, because if he would read through the statutes, the sections of law that deal with teacher licensure, He would not understand any of it. It is so convoluted. It is the reason that we haven't been able to invite in candidates who either come to the state or haven't taught for a few years and haven't gotten licensed. How complicated and confusing it is to them. And then to have the two units, MDE issuing the license, but the Board of Teaching setting the policy. We have brought together the recommendations, which were bipartisan from the Legislative Study Group, and come up with one unit, a new board called the Professional Licensing, Educator Licensing and Standards Board, which, you know, we put a lot of thought into it. And Senator Pratt and I compromised on many of those issues because we had a little different approach. So, you know, not understanding current law and how confusing it is, I'm not sure that, you know, I'm able to convince the governor otherwise if he's never read the law.
I think from that standpoint, there might be time. I guess the question is, the governor's also wrapped up in budget negotiations. And, you know, is this just a way to kick the can down the road? What's really happening here is he's hurting rural districts more than he's hurting suburban districts. And we gave him a very nonpartisan bill that's being vetoed on very partisan reasons.
So you have another bill that you're going to have to work on, apparently, the finance bill. Can this just be folded into that?
Well, yes, we could roll in a bill regarding teacher licensure and governance. But, you know, Representative Loon has a far different approach from Senator Pratt and me. She would give it to the department. They would have to take over everything, and there would not be a teacher board. There could be an advisory board, but her ideas are far different from this kind of reform and innovation. So we're going to have two different approaches here that we're going to have to work out. And I think, you know, that the governor better sit down and meet with Senator Pratt and me and figure out which direction we're going to take. Because if he likes this new approach, then he has to come to terms with us as well. This is not a one-way street. This is just, and the commissioner said to me moments ago that she couldn't tell the governor what to do. And I disagreed with her because we have worked with her and she's given us, she told us she had permission to negotiate with us. Well, you know, that's not honesty. That's just misleading us because we worked so hard and putting all those staff to work.
If you can't reach an agreement by the end of the session, what would the consequences be of another year under this, as you described on the floor, broken system?
Well, the status quo is going to continue to confuse even our new candidates because of the way the statute is written. And so anyone seeking advice from MDE's licensing division is still going to be confused because they don't have a standard to follow. So they're going to be doing what they've been doing now, telling them, well, you have to go to your college, find out what courses you need to take, whereas we have designed a tier system that specifically lays out what is required. And if there's question about the alternative pathways in Tier 3, that's what we're looking for today. We're looking for, you know, grow your own programs like Minneapolis has. They have a different approach to how they train teachers. That's not a MACD program. That's not a Minnesota Association of College Teacher Education program. That's a homegrown, and we're looking for those because those are the places where we have paraprofessionals and many paraprofessionals of color who want to become teachers, and this is the way they can enter the profession. And I don't think the governor understands why it's so important to have options. And those are ideas that Senator Pratt and his team came up with that we accepted on the House side because we said, yes, we want Teach for America to come to Minnesota. We want alternative pathways to be honored that we put into law in 2011, the first bill the governor signed in 2011. And it's so hard to get this conflict between the colleges of education and alternative programs to work together. Furthermore, these grow your owns, and many school districts are taking this up, and they are creating teachers themselves because we need them. So, long answer to short question.
Many of the Democrats argued the other day that they are persuaded by the arguments of Education Minnesota, the large and powerful teachers union, that this would lower standards of teachers. So will you reflect and react to the influence of the teachers union on this bill and the veto?
You know, it's interesting that the teacher union has put so much pressure on at the end because they really didn't bring concerns to us. And what happened on the House floor was a result of I think, most of the Democrats not having read the bill. And, you know, the questions that were asked were actually character attacks on me. They weren't about the bill. And that was very offensive. I mean, even Representative Sandstead came to me and did admit the next day that there were really good proposals in the bill. And I said, well, why were you attacking my character then? But that's what they were doing. They weren't concentrating on the good that was in the bill or their solutions, because they never brought anything forth. But instead, you know, attacking this good work that a team has done. And it's not me, and it's not Senator Pratt, it's a team. We had all those 5 months of meetings. We had stakeholder after stakeholder. We have all the education groups supporting us, and they're the ones who hire teachers, not Education Minnesota.
Well, and I sat down with Education Minnesota numerous times, and we walked through the proposal. And certainly, along the idea of compromise, there were areas we didn't agree. And I did take some of their language along the way. But it seems to me that Education Minnesota, along with the governor, is taking an all-or-nothing approach. They're not willing to compromise. It's their way or no way.
On the Senate floor, it seems like Senator Hoffman raised some issues about special education, sort of certified instructors. Is there anything in this bill that would affect special education?
Well, there's a review of licenses, because our special education licenses have grown to be about 45 different licenses. And when you get into rural Minnesota, and you can only have 1 or 2 or 3 special education teachers, but you have students categorized in all those different categories of special needs, you have to have the ability to have a special education teacher address those different needs, because you cannot afford, nor can you find, a special education teacher. Many of the community experts are special education community experts, because we don't have teachers in that area. And that is because, or one of the reasons is that the categories of special needs have grown by leaps and bounds. And so the Board of Teaching designed another license for each one of those. But not every school district can afford to have that kind of combination unless we can review these licenses and see if there are some adaptations we can make to help those districts.
I think the other thing is, if you look at our support for the alternative programs, and particularly the Grow Your Own, a lot of those are being worked on in the special education area.
That's right.
And we've got paras working with kids in fairly low-paying jobs that we're now giving a pathway to a real teaching career for those very students. And so I respectfully disagree with Senator Hoffman. I think we've done a good job, which is why special education educators have supported this bill.
Representative Hamilton told me last week that Dayton's administration is waging a war on agriculture. Senator Pratt, you said this especially will hurt rural Minnesota, and maybe some of the rural folks want to get up and talk about if this is an extension of, this is really a war on rural Minnesota, or is this totally unrelated to other things?
Well, I don't know that it's a war on rural Minnesota, but I will say this, this is a real setback for rural Minnesota education. We have a lot of small school districts out in rural Minnesota, and so our Tier 1 provisions gives them some options to bring in some experts and teach maybe an hour a day or something like that. And the question asked earlier about would this erode the quality of teachers we have in education? And my comment to that is no, I don't believe for 1 minute that it would do that. But let's look at a little example. You got a small school in rural Minnesota, and they have an opportunity, and they're limited on the number of teachers they can have, and it's hard to find the teachers to fill the positions. So are we better off not to have a shop class? Are we better off not to have a finance class than to bring in a local expert and let them come in? If you've got a contractor that's a well-known contractor, he's above board, he's certified, he's licensed, were we better off not to have a shop class in these small schools or have him come in and teach them for 1 hour a day? Are we better off to have students that don't get a class in finance because we're not going to allow the banker to come in and teach it for 1 day? Are we better off to have students in rural Minnesota in the heart of agriculture not have an ag class because we can't get an expert to help them for 1 day? This bill really shortchanges rural Minnesota. This is that tier really is going to have impact on rural Minnesota. It gives our rural school boards some options, and in this bill, and without those, we're going to take those back away. And I just think that's very unfortunate that we don't look at the overall picture instead of trying to look at a small piece of the pie. And I do not believe that this is going to reduce the quality of education, the the quality of our teachers or the opportunities.
In your district, Senator, how many go without a teacher in some discipline because they can't get them?
Well, I don't have an exact number of how many there are, but I can tell you this, it's pretty simple. If you take a look at the rural districts and what they can offer for classes, and take a look at the metro districts and what they offer for classes, there's no comparison. And there's a reason why. And that reason is because it's hard to get teachers, and we don't have enough reasons to have a teacher teach several hours a day. We maybe need one person to come in and specialize, like I said, in shop class or finance or something like that. So that would be my answer to that.
And I would add that this is indeed a slap in the face to career and technical education and career pathways. They are part of Tier 1, and they have to have a professional credential. As Senator Dames is saying, we desperately need these persons with expertise in our classrooms, and they would now have a license called a Tier 1 license. Another reason that we call it a Tier 1 is that we're looking for those candidates, whether they're in career technical or in an academic subject, to move up to a Tier 2, as they can move into a teacher preparation program or grow your own. But this is indeed a slap in the face to career and technical. They asked us not to do a carve-out, and we didn't. We included them. But we gave them an unlimited status for renewal because they come with a professional credential, which is what we should honor because they're the experts in that field.
And when we look at career and technical, and thank you for bringing that up, when we look at career and technical, look at the shortages we have. One of the reasons we have those shortages is because we're not giving the students the opportunities in high school to experience what some of those careers would be like. This bill allows that. This bill brings those people in so those students can have that experience. And once they have that experience, they might feel that this is a profession they'd like to be in. But we've got to start opening these doors and these pathways for these people to do that. And this is an opportunity to do that.
Good words. I'd like to add a little bit too, because I represent a number of rural communities and school districts. And I echo exactly what the senator was saying. And you had a very good point. I believe there is a huge information gap right now between the governor's office and rural Minnesota. I see it in agriculture when I go about talking to our farmers, and I see it in education when I'm talking to our schools, our school boards, our superintendents. We need to think outside the box here. We need to get outside of the status quo, and that's what's going to help rural Minnesota. We need a toolbox with many options. That's what this bill gives us. That's what this structure gives us. It's a solid structure, and I would really encourage the governor to rethink it because it's a huge lifeline for our rural communities.
Any other questions?
Are you at least happy that he signed your Real ID bill?
That's an easy one to answer, yes.
We all are.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate the short notice.
Thanks.